So the precautionary principle is something that it underlies environmental protection work, and we've largely abandoned it in this society, in this entire culture. We've said we're not going to pursue the precautionary principle. Instead, we're going to go after the last money or the next dollar or whatever it is. Precautionary principle says you assume the worst case scenario. You assume the worst case scenario and you plan around it, you plan for it, you try to prevent it, you try to take precaution against what is the worst case scenario. So even if what we are talking about is in fact the worst case scenario, I got no problem with that. I have no problem with identifying what we say as the worst case scenario and then stepping into the breach to try to avoid it. Because if we can avoid the worst case scenario, then surely whatever comes at us that's less bad than that, we can deal with as well.
Exactly. That's it. And I actually see kind of two potential focal points, one being the no nukes, the other being refreeze the Arctic, right? Each with very different, refreezing the Arctic is just buying us some time, right? Buying us some time so that we can do the no nukes. I mean, look, we're gonna do a lot better at it if we have 6 years of industrial civilization in which to ship around goods and materials and tools and spare parts than if we have 6 months. It's just duh. So so if for no other reason than to buy us time to do no nukes, let's refreeze the Arctic. Now, if it happens that we buy us enough time that we're then able to go after multiple of these in parallel and humanity starts to transform, as we must if we're going to survive, then, sky's the limit. But at a minimum, let's save the baby, which is life on Earth itself, by shutting down the nukes. And to do that, the first step is, well, there's really two first steps. One is to lay siege, times 444. And the other is to refreeze the Arctic.
Right.
We got two missions.
Yeah. Right? Yes, absolutely. And we don't know enough about either one of them to proceed ourselves. So we're reaching out to everybody on planet Earth who gives a shit, which I suspect is almost everybody. There's a sociopath here and there, maybe a psychopath, who's not going to be interested in retaining the potential for life on Earth. This message is not for them.
Exactly. And, one of the things that's frustrating for me about YouTube is, you get so much of this negativity thrown out. And so as we're launching Radish, we're launching it with one principle that's also the title of a book written by a professor at Stanford in the business school. This is very serious stuff. I may have mentioned it to you before, but the book is called The No Asshole Rule. No kidding. I mean, it's a very serious business book, and it basically goes into the fact that there's an epidemic of assholes in, corporate America. And at Microsoft, oh my goodness, it was like an Ebola outbreak of assholes. And so anyway, we're implementing the no asshole rule within Radish.
I thought that was the whole point. I thought that was the whole point of YouTube, was a troll farm. It's a place to grow troll assholes.
So here's how I'm repositioning YouTube. Yes, we're going to keep posting all these videos up on YouTube because that's how a gazillion people find out about it. But I'm simply, the comment section of YouTube is the nosebleed section, at the baseball stadium, right? Radish.org are the box seats, right? That's where you want to be. That's where there's beer and hot dogs every 5 minutes, and you get to actually see what's going on, So, but people are welcome to graduate from the nosebleed section to the box seats. And in fact, they're encouraged to do so, but absolutely no assholes. Right? If anyone gets on Radish and they start being mean to people or disrespectful or whatever, or just being super negative with no positive purpose, there's a point to being negative about a bad idea if you've got a better idea.
Sure.
Right? Okay.
There's a group of moderators for the Nature Bats Last channel, and they just keep track of the comments and they delete if it doesn't make a contribution. Somebody's not making a contribution if they're just there to gain attention for themselves by pointing out, using a false name, by pointing out, woo, woo, look at me, look at me, look at me. Well, we don't need that. That doesn't make any positive contribution. Just like, everybody is gathered around burying the dead, and one guy is jumping over the graves. Look at me, look at me, look at me. Come on, at some point, we need to get serious and not recognize that not everything is a joke, including burying the dead.
Totally, totally. Well, anyway, yeah. So no, I appreciate what you do there on Nature Bats Last. I don't quite have the staff of volunteers to do that for the videos that I've published, but what's real one thing
this is one person doing this.
Got it.
This is a voluntary staff of one.
No, hey, it's infinitely many more than mine. But what's interesting is I'm kind of like a how when there's like a whale moving through the ocean, there's kind of like this whole ecosystem of smaller creatures that kind of tell you. I'm kind of like a bottom feeder. You're the whale, and every time you take a dump, basically I get to eat. And I mean, honest to goodness. So many great collaborators have joined Radish because they've been following Guy McPherson, and boom, here pops the Sierra Club dinner or whatever, and it's like, and then they reach out. One of them drove all the way up from Olympia, Washington, up here to Whidbey Island yesterday, and we hung out for several hours. He'd been following you for years, and his name is Adam Soul, and he's come up with this. You may have heard of him, and he's come up with this whole plan for doing away with money in our civilization, and he really sees money as an addictive substance, and I can certainly attest to that. Anyway, he's really, at first I was kind of like, all right, some kind of crackpotty guy who thinks we can get rid of money, haha, and then I started paying attention, and it was like, wait a second, this really makes sense. Mm-hmm. And he started, participating in the Social Club at the End of the World, our weekly video conference that anyone can join. And so, boom, just out of the blue, he just appeared. And but he's written this really great manifesto. And that's just an example of someone coming at it with a specific angle, a specific perspective, right? That's quite unique. And, and then the rest of it's kind of waking up to that. Like, you've woken us up to this perspective that we might be on the brink of extinction. And in fact, all scientific facts, data, and analysis point to the inevitable conclusion that, yeah, that's the direction we've been heading. And, that was, wow, that's what really woke me up into saying, okay, I can't just be comfortably, messing around in life, working on projects. We've got a really tight deadline now. And that's when I reached out to you, and we started collaborating, and it's totally changed my life, totally changed my focus. And in fact, radical collective intelligence, whereas I used to be seeing that in admittedly egocentric, selfish terms as my cool thing or our cool thing or whatever. Now we're totally opening it up to the world and making it open source, everything open source. And we're asking the world, just like we're asking for help in nuclear expertise, we're asking for help in artificial intelligence. And yesterday I had a video conference with a former colleague, well, really always colleague of mine is how I think of him, Dr. David Fogel. He and his dad have been amazing pioneers in artificial intelligence. His dad invented evolutionary programming back in the early 60s at UCLA when he was getting his PhD. Anyway, we had an hour-long video conference last night. I laid out the details and guts of radical collective intelligence, the urgency of refreezing the Arctic, and he has seen a video of yours, and he's looked and studied the graph where 22, 12, 22, 12, 22, 12. And he's engaged in a way I've never seen him before. Before he was basically saying, well, you can't how are you going to disprove the null hypothesis that that basically the Earth is fine and everything's going to go on as it was, right? That's where he was a year ago. But now, man, he's really, progressed. And so, you don't
have to spend very long looking at graphics about the ice in the Arctic, particularly the volume, before you come to the realization that this is not headed in a good direction. And when you consider that there hasn't been a human being on Earth in a long time with an ice-free Arctic, right? We haven't had an ice-free Arctic for at least 2.6 million years. And the first Homo sapiens showed up on the planet about 300,000 years ago. Yeah. And so there's this big disconnect between ice-free Arctic and habitat for humans on Earth. And even the politician, one of the presidents of a country in the world, the president of Finland, has been going around the country, going around the world, telling people that if we lose the Arctic ice, we lose habitat for humans. It's that simple.
That's
If
it.
a politician is willing to admit this without launching nuclear weapons in response, then we're onto something here.
Totally. Hey, guy, do you mind if I smoke?
No.
Okay. Now, we're totally onto something, Guy. Now, so we've got two major areas of focus that tie together quite well. And this is the beginning of a new story for humanity. These very specifics, right? There were specifics in the story of Noah's Ark. It wasn't just Noah's spiritual transformation and who cares about the details, just meditate. No, there was an ark, there was a boat, there was a flood, there were specifics. Well, there's real hardcore specifics here. Ice, radiation management, heat management, the air conditioner for the Northern Hemisphere, and nuclear, right? And
no qubits. No qubits involved this time. So it makes it so much easier to handle.
What are qubits? Exactly.
There's this old bit by Bill Cosby. And Noah is talking to God. And God tells him to build this ark of a certain size, 72 cubits long or whatever. And Noah's keeping track of all this stuff. And then he says, God, what's a cubit?
Basically like a meter or something like that, probably.
Right. Yeah. So, they didn't even get past the initial stages of the conversation. Of course, we're stuck on some detail. So we don't even have to worry about the qubits today.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, but I mean, what a story, right?
And what a mission. What a mission. We're talking about the potential for the future of life on Earth. Who could not want to get involved in a mission that grand? This is not a moonshot. This is a life shot, right? This is not just whether we can make it to Mars. This is not just whether we can send a monkey to Uranus or whatever. Insert your own joke here. This is about life forever. Forever's a long time, especially toward the end. We're talking about a long time here.
A really long time. And for all we know, we're the only rock in the universe where there's complex life.
Right. Yeah. For all we know, that's right. As far as we know, we are intelligent life in the universe. I don't doubt that there is other intelligent life in the universe. Because of the vastness of the universe. And, you read Carl Sagan for a while and you sort of come to the conclusion that it's incredibly likely, but I also think it's incredibly unlikely that we will ever encounter those other organisms. So if this is our place, and it clearly is, then let's make a stand.
Exactly. And what a beautiful stand. We essentially red card out the offending species ourselves, and but we do so with such grace, right? And such spirituality that future species of intelligent life will look back and say, yeah, they really screwed up. It's kind of like the bad, that movie Runaway Train?
Yeah, I don't do movies much.
Oh, that I know. But this was a long time ago before you went off the grid. Anyway,
really?
Yeah. But anyway, it's like there's this final scene where there's this bad guy who he's been in prison for years, and who knows how many people he's killed or whatever. But in the very final scene of the movie, he saves a bunch of lives, right? And he dies himself. Right. So it's kind of like we become that species that, yeah, we were bad to the bone, going around, hurting women, hurting people, hurting, but then at the end, we're like, oh, man, that's messed up. And, we grab the fire extinguisher and do something cool. Right. That's a species that I can say, all right, yeah, I don't condone any of the bad stuff that they did. But man, that was damn compassionate of humanity to pull that off at the end.
Yeah. Those of us who are paying attention maybe are seeking redemption on behalf of our species and on behalf of ourselves. and this might be the only shot we got.
That's it. That's it. And so, yeah, with two objectives that actually don't depend upon each other, right? Refreezing the Arctic is cool for its own sake, right? And, you know, going no nukes, even if we don't refreeze the Arctic, that's, you know, the big objective. That's the big objective, the biggest of all. And if we can do more beyond that, wonderful. But if, you know, if refreezing the Arctic can be a bridge to that future of buying us more time to shut down,
right.
You know.
Right.
And, you know, one of the cool things, Guy, is that as this community forms around this big dream, this, you know, goal of shutting down nuclear, or as much of it as possible, because, you know, close only counts with horseshoes, hand grenades, and shutting down nuclear power plants. You know, if we get to the point where we shut down all but 10, and those 10 go Fukushima, and yeah, it's a bad nuclear winter and all that, but, you know, the cockroaches and lichens and earthworms get through it. Great, complex life survived. Right.
Right. There's a big difference between 10 nuclear power facilities melting down catastrophically and 400 of them melting down catastrophically. So absolutely. And, you know, to not give it a try seems like the worst case scenario to me. If we don't succeed, we don't succeed. And of course, that's the story of humanity for our entire species and then some, for going back 2.8 million years to the first humans walking upright, right? There's a lot of failure along the way. A lot of things that didn't quite pan out the way we thought. But to go down without so much as attempting to throw a wet blanket on the enormous trash fire we have ignited seems like the worst we could do.
Exactly. And so it becomes a bifurcation between the best and the worst. The best of us versus the worst of humanity, which was basically those people throwing rotten tomatoes at the firemen running into the burning building.
Right.
Which side do you want to be on?
Let's wrap the recorded portion of this. So
yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
And
great to see you guys. Great to
and then we'll wrap up.
You got it. Okay. Stopping now.